Lawmakers in Missouri have decided to brazenly go against the will of their own constituents who voted overwhelmingly to expand the state's Medicaid program. Now, while this is happening in Missouri, it's important to keep in mind that GOP-led state legislatures throughout the country have been following a very similar trend. Let's take a look at what's happening in Missouri, though, where back in August, 53% of voters in Missouri approved the expansion to Medicaid, allowing an additional 275,000 Missourians to become eligible for Medicaid later this year. So this was done through a ballot initiative, and that is, a majority of voters, 53%. They want this expansion to happen. Now, in voting against funding Missouri's Medicaid expansion, the state Senate's top budgeter, Republican Dan Hedgeman, said, quote, "If the voters had all the information we do, I think they would have made a different decision."
Okay, so I got to, before we even get to the other states, etc. All right, number one, that's the most arrogant, elitist thing I have ever heard.
100%.
I do declare if the voters weren't so ignorant, they would have obviously voted with the Republicans and made sure that they don't get their own health care. They would have, of course, voted with corporate interests and make sure that they were slaves to the insurance companies and didn't try to liberate themselves by expanding Medicaid. The voters are so stupid, the Republican leader explained. Okay, second of all, you're either gonna have ballot initiatives or you aren't. You don't get to have ballot initiatives, and if they vote in favor of corporations, go, great, fine, we tricked you with all the millions of dollars we spent on ads. Now you get to serve corporations even more and they get to crush you more. But if you vote against corporate interests, how dare you? Nope, you didn't mean it, you didn't mean it. We're just gonna wipe it away. I mean, look, man, if you're in Missouri, how do you not get it? You just voted for this. And the Republicans are saying, screw democracy, by the way, for the 28th time in a row, right? They just said it in the 2020 election too. And in this case, they're saying, no, I saw you, it's clear you voted for this, and I don't want you to have it. I'm just gonna rob you. I'm gonna rob you of this particular initiative and of your democracy.
So let's talk about the dirty tricks that GOP-led state legislatures are playing, because you just mentioned, are we gonna have ballot initiatives or aren't we? And when the ballot measures pass, certainly the ballot measures that the GOP lawmakers are not in favor of, what they try to do is make it very difficult for certain ballot initiatives to make it onto the ballot in the future. So they'll make it more expensive in order to engage in that effort. They'll make sure that they'll raise the threshold for the number of signatures they need on petitions to get a ballot initiative on the ballot. So they try to restrict it in an effort to do away with this direct democracy process that happens in many states. Now, this is happening in Missouri. I also want to just quickly touch on the lie that they tell their constituents in regard to expanding the Medicaid program, which of course is the state's healthcare program for, honestly, poor people, needy people, people who don't have the funds or the income necessary to provide health insurance for themselves. What they'll argue is that, well, we just don't have the money appropriated in our state budget. We just don't have the money. We don't have the funds. But when they expand it, they do so under a provision in the Affordable Care Act, which brings in federal money to the state for the sole purpose of expanding the Medicaid program. That was actually a really good part of the Affordable Care Act that many red states decided to deny their own constituents. So in this case, we're not even talking about state funding, we're talking about federal funding, free money to help poor people access healthcare in their state. And it doesn't matter, the GOP in that state has decided, no, we're not interested. We're gonna go ahead and deny what our constituents voted for. Now again, this is a trend that we're seeing across the country. In fact, voters in South Dakota legalized marijuana, they raised the minimum wage, and they also expanded casino gambling. And what did Republican lawmakers in the state do? They moved to make it more difficult to get ballot initiatives onto the ballot. In Montana, voters last year approved a recreational marijuana program that sends a significant portion of tax revenues to conservation purposes, but a Republican-backed legislative plan seeks to instead put up $6 million toward an addiction treatment program before redirecting a third of what's left to wildlife habitat parks and recreational facilities. The list goes on and on, Cenk. They did the same thing in Utah, where voters passed Medicaid expansion back in 2018. Conservative lawmakers delayed its full implementation before adding work requirements. In Arizona, Republicans are looking to eliminate about a third of the revenue from a voter-approved tax increase on the wealthy to fund education. They just don't care. They're not into you, they don't want to represent you, and if you tell them through a ballot initiative that you want certain programs, you want certain policies implemented, they'll just give you the middle finger and say, no, we don't represent you, we represent corporate interests, we represent our own interests, and you can go ahead and F off. That's what they're essentially doing here.
So there are two issues here. One is, it's all Republicans, Republican legislators that are saying, no, we hate democracy. If you vote against our corporate donors, we will kill whatever you said you wanted to do. You want to increase minimum wage? I don't like it. My corporate donors don't like it at all. You want to tax the wealthy? My corporate donors and my wealthy donors, they don't like it at all. So no, we're not going to give you your democracy. So that is the one thing. On that alone, you should always vote against Republicans. I'm dead serious. I don't care what any stupid person in the mainstream media says. Oh no, you never know. Maybe all of these Republicans will turn en masse. Maybe there's one secret good Republican. No, in Missouri, they're screwing you over and over and over again. Every time you vote for something, they go, I don't care. I hate you, I love my donors, so screw you. But let's stay in Missouri, because it's also a nonpartisan issue, okay? Because the Democratic Party sucks too. So don't get me wrong, we're super honest about that. The Republicans, I'm against because they're robbing you of democracy. But look at what the games that they played. So in Missouri, when Josh Hawley's running against Claire McCaskill, they have as a ballot initiative raising the minimum wage. It crushes. It wins with over 60% of the vote, 62% of the vote. McCaskill is a Democrat. She's theoretically in favor of that initiative. She doesn't run on it at all. Why doesn't she run on something that is deeply, deeply popular that could have helped her beat Hawley? Well, her corporate donors don't want it. So she was against it. And she lost. Why? Because Democrats don't mean it. They say they want to increase the minimum wage, but the minute they have an opportunity to fight for it, they don't. And that just happened again at the national level. So voters say, screw you, that I'm not going to vote for you. Hawley pretends to be a populist. He's supposed to be the biggest populist in the Republican Party right now. And he's like, oh, I'm for the little guy, the average guy, yeah, right, okay. Gets into the Senate, he knows how his state voted, overwhelmingly to increase the minimum wage. The minute the minimum wage comes up, he's like, no, I vote no, no way, no way. That hurts my poor corporate friends. You're all lying, corrupt political hacks. Don't believe the mainstream media. They tell you these are honest people, principled people having real debates. No, they're all doing exactly what their donors tell them to do. So I've got to give you the last example. South Dakota, they did pass this awesome ballot initiative, deeply red state. 60% voted for Trump, okay? Now, a couple of years back, they passed a ballot initiative that says, we're gonna lower the limit on campaign contributions to legislators. Great. We're gonna provide for public financing so that people can raise small amounts from real people in South Dakota. And we're gonna ban you from being a lobbyist for 2 years and ban you from taking gifts over $100 from lobbyists, okay? It passes overwhelmingly. Because even in a red state, in a deeply Republican state, it's not the voters' problem, it's the politicians' problem. The Republican voters say, good, I don't want corruption. And that's what I give credit to Republican voters for all the time. I hit them on everything else, but they hate corruption, and I love that, okay? The legislature comes back in and goes, nope, not gonna do it. I wanna take gifts from lobbyists. So, and I don't want my spending to be limited. I wanna take as much as I can from lobbyists. So they just go, we're gonna overrule democracy. No, you're either gonna have ballot initiatives or you're not. You're either gonna have democracy or you're not. So every time a Republican kills democracy, and they've done it in all of these states, we need the press to be crystal clear. It is that one is not even. The Republicans say, we will serve our corporate masters at all costs, including killing democracy and voting against our own voters, even if they're Trump voters, even if it's in the reddest state. We don't care, we hate you, we love our donors, we're deeply corrupt. Yet, here we are. Where else do you hear that? You hear that on NBC, on ABC, on CBS? You hear it nowhere. They're the corporate media, and they're with these same scummy corporate politicians playing a shell game on all of us. If you're in Missouri right now, you should be enraged. And one of the things you should do is vote out every Republican, and by the way, every corporate Democrat in a primary. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.